Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of FantasyForesight.com, coming to you from the Rambo Fixture Company studios. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Welcome in, everyone. It is Wednesday, April 10th. We are thrilled to be back here with you to discuss the quarterbacks and running backs of the AFC South. How you doing tonight, Jay?
Ben, I am so excited to finally be back, man. It feels like forever, but behind the scenes, we've been working so hard on so many great developments at FantasyForesight.com. We are dying to bring you the details of what we are about to unleash on the fantasy football world, but those are things to come. We have some great things we're working on here at Fantasy Foresight and can't wait to let you know all about it. But before we get to that, let's talk about the AFC South and let's tackle some quarterbacks.
Yes, sir. First up, we've got the Tennessee Titans quarterback, Marcus Mariota. He led his team to a 9-7 record despite finishing as QB 24. Total Foresight had him predicted as QB 16 to start the year. Mike Clay had him as QB 17. And coming into the season, he had a new offense, a new coach, and it was a prove-it season for him. And at the time, we couldn't really decide if that was going to be a good thing or a bad thing for his fantasy outlook. Clearly, it wasn't a good thing. And he was going in the 130s heading into the season. We were very lukewarm on him. And you know, it showed through. And as far as his statistics go, he is a tale of two opposite ends of the spectrum. As far as quarterback rating, passing attempts, passing yards, and passing touchdowns, he ranked very low at the position across the board. His accuracy rate was 68.9%, which was good enough for QB5, minimum 6 starts. But he was QB 22 and yards per attempt was 7.6. So his accuracy seemed to be a result of his extremely conservative passing offense. And even for free in drafts, way too early ADP via fantasyfootballcalculator.com, he's going undrafted right now. Even at that price, even in 2 QB leagues, I think I'm good right now. What about you, Jay?
Listen, that coaching staff knows what they have. They grinded out wins all season long. And for them to have a back-end QB2 quarterback leading their team and to finish the season with a winning record at 9-7, they did a tremendous job. But they know at the end of the day, they can't trust Marcus Mariota to win them games with his arms. And he's not going to win my fantasy team with his arm either. So moving on.
I mean, 331 attempts, 2,500 yards, 13 total touchdowns, 11 passing, 2 rushing. It's not there for him in that offense. I think he's a fine leader, a good character guy. I mean, he's very accurate. I mean, I wonder what he would do with some explosive receivers or some more weapons to throw to. Who knows? But right now, they're a grinded out, run the ball football team.
Oh, and we'll get to that later.
Oh, yes, we will. And, but that comes at the expense of Mariota's fantasy value. And he's not doing anything explosive. He's QB8 in rushing attempts, QB8 and rushing yards, QB10, tied for QB10 and rushing touchdowns. But still, the passing volume is so not there that doesn't even make a dent.
Yeah. You can keep talking about Marcus Mariota all night because I really don't want to go to our next quarterback on this list because we're going to take some lumps, my friend. Do we need to do this?
We definitely need to do this, and it's definitely time for us to officially break up with him in the fantasy realm forever. So I'll just let you take it away.
Okay. Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback Blake Bortles, who is now the backup quarterback for the LA Rams, Jared Goff. Blake came into the season with an improved offensive line, a new 3-year contract extension, and we thought at a free draft cost, he could at least return some low-end QB1 value since he finished in 2017 as QB13. He finished QB9 in 2016. He finished QB4 in 2015. So we're thinking, hey, free, we could get some value here. Why not? We could not have been more wrong. Blake the Snake was just a dumpster fire this season. That Jacksonville offense, that Jacksonville team really was mired in controversy for a lot of the season and ineptitude on both sides of the football, which led them to a 5-11 record. A team with Super Bowl aspirations heading into the season finished 5-11, and their quarterback play was a large part of that. He was just bad, kids. Bad. In 13 games, his completion percentage was 60% for 2,700 yards, 13 touchdowns, 11 picks. When you have a quarterback that is throwing the ball for 2,700 yards and his touchdown interception ratio is just about even, you're not going to have a lot of success on the offensive side of the football. And that's going to put pressure on the defensive side too. And that's what you have in Jacksonville.
What's amazing, Jay, is that he and Marcus Mariota had extremely, eerily similar statistical seasons, both rushing and passing, if you take a close look at it. However, Blake's team finished 5-11, where Marcus Mariota's team finished 9-7.
Again, I give tremendous credit to Mike Vrabel and that coaching staff because they did what they had to do to win football games, and you could see it. And there were a few coaching staffs in the NFL last season who really impressed, and Tennessee's was one of them. Jacksonville, not so much, but they have some hope coming in. They have Big Nick Foles coming to town now to save the day, so we'll see what happens with that as we get into it for our 2019 preview episodes. But, I think at this point, Blake Bortles he's a career backup guy now. He's in the role he probably should have been in the entire time, holding the clipboard on the sidelines. But I swear, man, if Jared Goff goes down with injury and Blake comes in and starts lighting it up,
He's got all the weapons in the world out there. And if something happens to Jared Goff, watch something stupid happen and Blake go win them a Super Bowl or something crazy. That's just how football works sometimes.
Enough of the scrubs. Let's talk about the talent at the position in this division.
Yes, sir. Next up, we've got Indianapolis quarterback Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck is back. Coming into 2018, he hadn't played since 2016, and we were concerned about not only rust, but his protection and his health. He had 156 career sacks at that time, including 4 in just 71 preseason snaps. I mean, despite that high O-line, I know, we were like, hey, this O-line's ranked high. One, you're playing him in the preseason. I get that. But if you're going to do that, you have to protect the guy. And it looked like he was going to be getting hit all season long. And, because of him missing the entire season in 2017, Total Foresight, all about metrics, all about the cold hard truth, had him as QB 25. And then he finished as QB 5 overall. Yeah. So, we were definitely wrong about that. But we were telling you that the concern is injury. Right. His price was 85 to 90. We weren't unhappy with that. There were guys that we would have preferred around that price point at that time, but it's still Andrew Luck, and he proved that he is all the way back. QB 6 in fantasy points per game, QB 5 overall, QB 2 in passing attempts, QB 5 in pass yards, QB 2 in pass touchdowns, QB 10 in passer rating, minimum 3 starts, QB 11 in accuracy, minimum 6 starts. So when you consider that he's QB 2 in volume and he's still throwing at 67% accuracy, that's insane. Way too early ADP. He's going as QB 2 next season, Jay.
The fact that we were so worried about his shoulder for such a long period of time, and then he comes back and finishes QB2 in pass attempts, that's all I need to know. I mean, it's not like he was out there, throwing it 15 to 17 times a game and they were being conservative. He finished with 639 pass attempts. The guy's back. He's rock solid. He's a locked and loaded QB1, top-tier quarterback moving forward.
Oh, absolutely. But it all comes down to your value, and a lot can happen between now and then. A lot can change with these ADPs, but his way too early ADP has him going 47 overall. Only quarterback being drafted ahead of him is Mahomes, and the 2 quarterbacks being drafted behind him, A-Raj and my guy, Baker Mayfield.
Nice. And I do have to say, there was a lot of risk coming into the season with Andrew Luck and that shoulder, and that's why his Total Foresight ranking was what it was. And it could have gone either way. 1 hit, 1 sack. We were all kind of holding our breath there at the beginning of the season to see how he could endure the grind, and he ended up shining, so we were wrong in the end. It very well could have gone the other way, and we would have been right, unfortunately. But in this case, we got it wrong, but I couldn't be happier for Mr. Luck, and moving forward, man, he's back.
Yeah, he's absolutely back. And I think that his volume is certainly in line to continue. And the price tag concerns me a little bit. But however, if you're going to pay that price, there's only a few quarterbacks worth that gamble. And he's certainly one of them.
Yep. All right, moving on. Let's get to another guy who really impressed this season, and that is Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson. Now, heading into the season, we had a limited sample size. We knew he wasn't quite getting his due, reflected in our total foresight ranking, as he was preseason QB 18. But he only played 7 games in 2017, so there was some risk baked into it. Now, he was under fire to begin the season, too. That offense was a little bit shaky. That offensive line wasn't protecting him, as well as I'm sure he would have hoped. But last season, even with his limited sample size, he finished QB1 overall in points per game. So that was something to keep an eye on entering 2018. And while the perception seemed to be that it was largely due to his rushing ability, his 102.9 passer rating suggested there was more to it than that. So, how did it shake out in 2018? He finished QB4 overall, played all 16 games. He was QB4 in points per game. His accuracy rate, Ben, was QB7, minimum 6 starts. His QB rating was QB6. So once again, as you indicated, his passer rating, his accuracy is there. It's not all his legs, even though his legs helped rescue him at times and keep him on the field for 16 games because his offensive line wasn't great, but he managed to stay on the field and endure, and not only that, light it up, be successful, and be accurate. And at the end of the day, what that all adds up to is an elite fantasy football and football scorer.
Without a doubt. And I love the fact that he finished as QB 15 in pass attempts, but he outperformed QB 15 in both pass yards and pass touchdowns. He was QB 11 with over 4,100 yards, and he was QB 12 with 26 touchdowns. So his volume wasn't super inflated. It's right in the middle of the road in the league. So I think that's very sustainable. And then when you talk about his rushing ability, he's QB3 in attempts with 99. Yeah. He's QB3 in yards with 551. He's tied for QB3 with 5 rushing touchdowns. So let's review. Year 1, play 7 games. QB1 in fantasy points per game during that time. Year 2, is he healthy? Were the 7 games in year 1 legit? Can he stay healthy? Yes, yes, and yes. I love the 4 QBs going ahead of him, Pat Mahomes, A-Rod, Luck, and Bake, but I really love Deshaun Watson at his current ADP cost. He is going as QB5 at 63 overall behind only Mahomes, Andrew Luck, A-Rod, and Baker Mayfield. I can understand all of those guys, but QB5 for Deshaun Watson, I feel like, is an exceptional value.
Absolutely. We talked about the accuracy, we talked about the rushing ability, and we talked about the fantasy scoring. What more do you want out of one of the most critical positions on a fantasy football team? What more can you say about the guy? If he needed to prove anything to you in 2018, he did so. He's a top-tier quarterback heading into 2019.
Absolutely. Elite fantasy quarterback going forward.
All right, now let's stick with the Houston Texans. We're going to move over to this running back side. And first up, we have Lamar Miller. We loved him coming into 2018, called him a sleeper because of his production during Watson's 7 games in the prior season, because defenses had to account for Watson as a runner, leaving easy space to run through with no threat to his workload because, let's face it, Deontay Foreman was still shelved at the time. So, we had him preseason ranked as RB19. Where did he finish? In 14 games, he finished RB23.
Yes,
That's
sir.
Pretty darn close, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really surprising, Ben, he finished RB13 in rush attempts, which is very surprising to me.
210, yeah, man.
He finished RB11 in rushing yards with 973. Would you ever have guessed at the end of the 2018 season, looking back, that Lamar Miller finished RB11 in rushing yards? I never would have guessed it, I'll be honest.
That's the beauty of these 360, wrap-up reviews, is there are things that you might not have been aware of at the end of it all. And then on top of being aware of it, then we get to examine it and figure out why it happened and whether or not we think it's going to be repeated.
And we can tell you why having RB11 rushing yards and RB13 rushing attempts led to RB14 in points per game, and that was he had 1 rushing touchdown tied for 26th in running backs.
Yeah, I think you meant to say it was RB 24 in points per game.
Yeah, sorry.
And yeah, no worries. But you're absolutely right. You're saying all these things as far as, he's got the high attempts, he's got the high rushing yards. How is he only running back 24 in points per game? Because he only had one touchdown.
Right.
So I think there is room for positive improvement as far as that statistical category goes, because all they have is Deontay Foreman and Alfred Blue. We told you Deontay Foreman might not be right until 2019, if ever, and he only played one game last year. Alfred Blue, you're my boy, Blue. We love you, but you're a handcuff. Yep. And unless Lamar Miller goes down, Alfred Blue is not somebody that I'm rostering. So I have every reason to expect that unless they replace Lamar Miller in the draft, that he's still going to be the best running back on that roster. Way too early. ADP agrees with me. They've got Foreman going as RB 39, 99 overall, and they've got Lamar Miller going as RB 30 at 69 overall. So if things don't change, I see a ton of value there.
I completely agree. And you nailed it on the head that if they don't replace or get some type of reinforcement in the draft, then Lamar Miller presents great value heading into 2019, where he's currently being drafted at RB 30, because I would, like you said, finishing RB 24 in points per game, RB 23 overall, and having only scored one touchdown, you would think that there is some positive movement there in that ranking. So really, there is some value where he's currently going.
Yeah, because I don't think we mentioned 4.6 yards an attempt.
No, and that was surprising too. Ben, I gotta say, looking back at Lamar Miller, he really surprised me from the fantasy perspective in 2018.
And how interesting is this group going at 69 overall? You've got Kenyon Drake, Tevin Coleman, now with the 49ers,
Yep.
And then you got Lamar Miller, Jordan Howard, now with the Eagles, and Kareem Hunt, suspended for 8 games, now with the Browns.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting group right there.
No
yeah. I cannot wait for us to get closer to the fantasy draft season and for all of these ADPs to just get more honed in and for everything to get recalibrated, the draft to happen, all the rookies get infused into everything. Yep. It's coming.
Hey, one backfield that I also really enjoyed this season was the Indianapolis Colts. And you had a guy, Marlon Mack, who at times flashed in his rookie season, didn't get a lot of attempts, so you didn't know what to make of him being the primary ball carrier heading into 2018. We were a little leery because of that, and he was missing time to start 2018 as well. He was coming in dinged up. So, we were a little frustrated. I think you were frustrated and kind of dismissed him, but he came back strong, man. He played 12 games, finished RB 14 in points per game. We had him ranked going into the season as RB 63. Like we said, he showed flashes. He showed efficiency with his opportunities. He just didn't have as many opportunities as a lot of us would have thought he would have gotten in Indy by the end of the 2017 season. But boy, he came back, and he came back strong. RB 15 in rush attempts, RB 16 in rush yards, RB 21 in yards per attempt, 4.7 yards per attempt, Ben. He was RB 7 in touchdowns, 9 touchdowns. He did not have the problem Lamar Miller had. He got in the end zone, and that's what helped him to an RB 14 points per game finish.
Yeah, and I do like the RB 14 in points per game in just 12 games. Yeah. That was enough for him to finish as RB 21 overall. So he's another one of those guys where I'm starting to warm up to the idea that at certain points in your draft, it is okay to draft guys that you know are going to miss some time for you, because when they do play, they play well enough on a points per game basis to make a difference.
And that's it, man. That is an excellent point. Look, I like Mac. I've been a fan. I think he's talented, but you're right. He came into the season banged up. He missed 4 games, and that risk has got to be baked into price. We love the points per game. That's fantastic, but you have to plan on that going into your season. You can't rely on this guy to be your rock solid RB1 or RB2.
You're right, Jay, and you make a great point. So let's play the game. We've got another very interesting group. He's currently going as RB15. And first of all, just for everybody that's not familiar with us, these settings at fantasy football FantasyFootballCalculator.com are always 12-team PPR. We're always talking about 12-team PPR. So he's going RB15, 31 overall. Going in front of him, Damian Williams and Leonard Fournette, and behind him, Sony Michel and Mark Ingram. You got some other ouchie concerns in that group as well. You got some other timeshare new team situation concerns as well. So once again, at 31 overall in your draft, you're being forced to make some very nerve-wracking decisions as far as some of these ouchie running backs go.
Honestly, man, you're absolutely right. Look, these guys are all talented. They can all score for you in fantasy, but they all have reliability issues. Whereas we just talked about Lamar Miller. He's going RB30. He's going 14 running back spots behind these guys. Now, he doesn't have a he lacks some of the PPR upside, but man, for a guy who can maybe play, a little bit more for your team, I don't know, man. It is an interesting group, and there's certainly a risk to all those guys.
Yeah, and our next guy in this backfield, Nyheim Hines, this is one of the feathers in our cap this preseason because, we told you about his amazing career at NC State where he was a wide receiver his sophomore and junior season, averaging 12 and a half yards a reception. And then all he did his senior year is switch to running back, rush for 112 yards, 12 touchdowns with a 5.6 yard per carry average. So we knew coming into the season, he was undrafted. We knew that that's somebody to look out for, especially because Marlon Mack was scheduled to be out the first few weeks of the season. And we love that value. And we were right. He played all 16 games and he finished as RB27 overall, Jay.
Yeah. And to top that, Ben, the stat that really jumps out at you, he finished tied for RB7 in targets. So huge in PPR land. And if you want to look at his PPR value, he was RB8 in receptions, RB15 in receiving yards, and tied for RB17 with a couple of scores. So he did get in the end zone. So his value, you're right, is absolutely the receiving portion of this backfield. Very similar to the Chicago Bears of 2018, where you had Tariq Cohen and Jordan Howard. That same 1-2 punch where you've got the traditional runner, then you've got the pass catcher out of the backfield. And Nyheim Hines did a wonderful job. He played in all 16 games, Ben. We talked about how big that is for your fantasy team. I need you on the field for me. I need you to play and score points. The guy has shown he can get through a full season unscathed. Love his value. Currently being drafted as RB43.
And when you're talking about being nervous about drafting Marlon Mack as RB15, I feel completely comfortable reaching on Hines beyond, he's going as RB43. I would have no problem taking him much sooner than that.
No, and I think Nyheim Hines' role is defined regardless of Marlon Mack's health, because you have Jordan Wilkins who's going to step in and take over those primary ball carrier duties. So Nyheim's going to get his opportunities.
Value. This is Andrew Luck's passing RB. We just told you how he was QB2 in passing attempts.
Yep.
And they run him too. He had 85 attempts for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. This guy will consistently produce for you week in and week out and give you a couple of plus games when Marlon Mack inevitably misses some more time.
All right, let's go over to that Jacksonville team that we said it was so deplorable on offense and talk about that backfield.
Yeah, well, you know what? We've got another feather in our cap guy in this backfield, but first up, we'll start off with Leonard Fournette. Coming into the season, we were aware that he was RB9 in 2017 in only 13 games. On the one hand, there was the injury concerns, but on the other hand, it was that Jacksonville team, and if he can play 16 games, the upside was so real, and we all love his physical running style. It's awesome, and it's just like, can he remain available? But Total Foresight and Mike Clay had some correlation coming into the season. Total Foresight liked him as RB10. Mike Clay agreed with us, liked him as RB9. He was going 9-11 overall behind Saquon and Melvin Gordon and right in front of Kareem Hunt and CMC. Hope you didn't pick Leonard Fournette because he finished as RB40 overall.
Yeah. He played in only 8 games, Ben. So there's the issue with him going into any season now, is that injury concern. Now, I do have to say, he finished RB12 in points per game, so really the what he can actually produce, we nailed that right on the head. So we know what to expect when he's on the field. He's just not on the field enough for us to invest that much into him on our fantasy teams.
Right, especially that high coming into the season, 9 to 11 overall. Now he's going as RB14 at 28 overall,
which is much more appropriately priced. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, and I'd probably still only draft him in the pinch, but at that point in drafts, and then hope for a couple of good weeks and then try and deal him. But there's Nick Chubb, Damian Williams, Marlon Mack, Sony Michel. I mean, there's other guys either before or after down on that list that I would feel better about than Leonard. But like I said, in the right circumstances, I'm going to understand that this is a risk reward type of player, and it's a ticking time bomb type of player, because his rookie season, he missed 3 games. His second season, he missed 8 games, and I believe 1 was due to suspension and the other 7 were due to injury.
Yeah.
So he's trending in the wrong direction.
No, you're absolutely right. So let's trend in the right direction. You said something about a feather in our cap in this backfield.
Oh, yeah. TJ Yeldon, man. Verbatim notes for the preseason. We wrote value, value, value. In the passing down back role, and with Fournette's durability concerns, we had zero problem if you take Yeldon in the last round of your draft or on the waiver wire. He has some durability concerns of his own, admittedly, but ideally, both he and Fournette would contribute to a lighter load for one another. And like I said, TJ was going undrafted. We had him ranked. Mike Clay didn't have him ranked. We had him ranked as RB38. He played in 14 games, so we were right about the injury concern, and we were correct to rank him because he finished as RB22 overall, Jay.
Crazy, man. I can't believe it. 104 attempts, 400 yards. He added 55 catches on 77 targets for 487 yards and 4 scores. You want to talk about some PPR value there. Now I can see why he finished where he did.
I mean, yeah, he had over 900 all-purpose yards, and he had 4 yards an attempt on the ground. And like you said, he had 77 targets. Like, that's just,
that's solid, man.
He made us look good for calling him out in the preseason, so we appreciate that. But now he doesn't have a team. He's currently a free agent. He's not currently fantasy relevant, but again, with the season that he had last year, he kind of showed that he could bounce back a little bit. He is a guy that historically definitely has injury concerns, and that's certainly going to be a knock against him in the free agency world. But, he's probably a guy that lands late towards training camp.
It'll be interesting to see where he lands and how that impacts wherever backfield he is. That's for sure. All right, now we've got a fun one to get into. Do you want to start this? Let's get into it. Tennessee Titans backfield. Derrick Henry, take it away, Ben.
Verbatim notes from the preseason.
All right.
DeMarco is gone. They have a great strength of schedule and O-line. Is this finally the year? I thought it could be, and not because I've been one of his day one honks. In the preseason, I said this could be his year. I have never been a Derrick Henry guy. I talked about how I don't like in the fantasy community how some guys just have this predetermination in the community that they're going to be a fantasy stud without any, actual tangible evidence. And then once you see some bad evidence, people are still making excuses saying you're going to be a stud. So I was never a Derrick Henry truther. Total Foresight had him as RB50 coming into the year, rightfully so. Mike Clay had him as RB24 coming into the season. He was being drafted 39 to 41 overall, but behind Alex Collins and Kenyon Drake, and in front of Lamar Miller and Jay Ajayi. He played all 16 games, and he finished as RB16. RB22 in points per game, too. So for everybody out there that just wants to say that his stats are completely inflated, you need to look at his stats for the second half of the season. He had a very legitimate second half of the season.
He had a very legitimate weeks 14 and 15 when he put together, depending on your league scoring settings, almost 100 fantasy points in 2 weeks. They were monster weeks. Now look, Derrick Henry has been a guy that I watch him and I see a big, strong, powerful, athletic runner that for some reason just can never shed tacklers. You look at him and you see why it should work, and I mean, it's almost inexplicable when you watch him play and it doesn't. So, okay, he breaks out towards the end of the season and now everyone's going to be riding this high. And I'm telling you, going into 2019, he shall be judged, Ben. I'm going to announce it now. He is going on trial. The fantasy gods will determine his true value and his true worth this season. It is going to happen. Charged with his defense, Ben. Charged with the prosecution, Jay.
All right, here's the thing. I am only coming to his defense based on my objective research. I was coming into my research not being a Derrick Henry guy, being like, I'm definitely not looking at him next season. That was a fluke. But let's dive into his numbers a little bit. He finished tied for RB11 in rushing attempts with 215. He finished as RB7 in yards with 1,059. He finished tied RB15, 4.9 yards an attempt, and tied for RB3 with 12 touchdowns. Passing game non-existent in Tennessee. That's not his fault. It's not his game really either.
Here's my problem, Ben. Here's my issue, and we will get into this in our preview episode for sure. But
we're getting into it now.
Okay, I see a guy who, for the first 8 weeks of the season, doesn't score double-digit fantasy points. The second half of the season, for the first, up until week 13, his season high was 17 points once. After that, 12 points in fantasy land and PPR the rest of the season was his high prior to the last 3 weeks of the season. So, Ben, the only issue I have is I see a guy that I keep watching and I keep waiting and I keep waiting and it doesn't happen and it doesn't happen and it doesn't happen. And then for 3 games, it's like it all comes together inexplicably, and that doesn't make sense to me.
It's not inexplicable. 10 times, Jay, he failed to get 15 touches. There's your explanation, sir.
Well,
that's not his fault. Give the man the ball. He's got over a 4-yard per carry attempt every single year he's been in this league. It doesn't matter what running back is in that backfield. He's got 4.2 yards per carry, 4.6 yards per carry, 4.9 yards per carry every year in the league. And just a couple weeks ago, per TitansOnline.com, speaking this week, Titans coach Mike Vrabel said he would like to build the offense around Derrick Henry.
That needs to be the case. Then you're trusting the words coming out of a coach's mouth during the offseason that they're going to
combined with what happened when they gave him the ball at the end of the last season.
If they're going to feed him the rock with that much volume, fine. Then I'll listen to him having value. Right now, I don't know if you touched on it. He's going RB18 overall behind Sony Michel and Mark Ingram and ahead of Aaron Jones and Devonta Freeman. So
tell me on that list. Okay, Sony Michel, let's start there. James White's taken all his passing volume. Sony's got durability issues of his own, and I don't know how potent that offense is anymore. Mark Ingram, we don't know who he is or what that role is going to be in the Baltimore offense. Aaron Jones, he's my guy. I love him. I would probably take him over Derrick Henry. Devonta Freeman, I don't know what kind of durability.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't know what that's going to be.
So I'm saying Derrick Henry belongs where he's being drafted
absolutely.
right now.
Yes,
and there is plenty of guys that I will happily take him over all day.
All right. We'll get into it more, I'm sure. All right.
Yes, we will. You put me on his defense, and I never had a predisposition towards him, and all the numbers are telling me pro Henry. So you got what you asked for, sir.
Foresight Ben is a Henry truther from now on.
I am now.
All right, let's wrap this up. Dion Lewis, Tennessee, he's the other running back there. Sweet Dion coming into 2018. We cautioned you about some of his injury concerns because he missed 18 games since 2015. We weren't sure how they were going to split their workloads, which we just went over. The workloads were varied. We didn't know what to expect. But we did like D-Lou's lower cost because of that. We also liked Sweet Dion's 5-yard attempt average and 6.7 yards per reception average after 2017. So we had him ranked RB20. Where did he finish up? Well, he actually played all 16 games and finished RB28. So we weren't far off. We were pretty much right on what we expected. Now, we get to the stats. Rushing yards, he finished RB26. Rushing yards per, let's see.
Rushing attempts, he finishes RB26. Rushing yards, he finished RB36. Yards per attempt, RB bad. Rushing touchdowns, RB bad.
Yeah, that's really where he struggled.
He was the pass-catching running back in an offense that just doesn't pass the ball.
No, yeah, and that was it, and that was the knock, and that's really where he faltered. Really, in the fantasy world, was they were just not a passing offense, and that really became evident late when your hero, Mr. Henry, exploded. So
my hero. Now he still had 155 carries, did Sweet Dion, and then he had the 67 targets, which was good for RB15. Yeah. So I do think there's room for Dion in this offense at the right price. It is a very run heavy offense. They clearly like him enough to give him the ball. I definitely think their roles will be more clearly defined going into next season. I think you're going to see Derrick Henry get more like 250 to 300 touches, and you'll see Dion have more towards 100 touches, I would say, as far as on the ground goes. And then Dion's probably getting almost all the passing work.
He's going right in front of Peyton Barber and Jamal Williams. You pick one of those three for me.
I mean, yeah, it's Dion. Thanks.
Right, exactly. So
yeah, and that's 132 overall. That's 132 overall as RB48 for a guy that just finished as RB28 in a two-man split backfield. So I think, like you said, there's value there.
Absolutely. All right, man, that was a good episode. I'm glad we got back to it. It's been too long. We got so many great things cooking at fantasyforesight.com. We are just dying to announce all these great developments. It's going to happen sooner than later, so stay tuned, stay with us, and yeah, we got a lot coming for you.
Yes, sir. We're just dotting some I's and crossing some T's, and as soon as we get all our ducks in a row, we're going to have some fun announcements to make. And next up for you, we've got the AFC South wide receivers and tight ends. Can't wait.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. Don't forget, you can find us at fantasyforesight.com.
And you can use the links at the bottom of the page to find us on social media. Follow us on Twitter at ForesightBen, at ForesightJ, and at Total Foresight. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
You've already found this podcast, but you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. Pretty much anywhere you pod. We appreciate you subscribing to our podcast. Feel free to leave us a review, and we'll catch you next time.